For 20 years she had tried to appear strong. Every time she stepped on stage, it felt like putting on armor so no one could see the pain inside. Ike's violence, his humiliation, his degradation, she buried it all inside. And when she stepped on stage, she put on the strong Tina mask. She had never shown her weakness to anyone, never let anyone know she needed help. But that night at Live Aid, in front of 15,000 people, her heart finally couldn't take it anymore. The accumulated weight of years falling from her shoulders. Her scream wasn't just a sound. It was the cry of her soul that had been silenced for 20 years. The explosion of the inner voice no one had heard. And at that moment, Tina Turner, known as the world's strongest woman, showed everyone her most fragile state. July 13, 1985. JFK Stadium, Philadelphia. Live Aid wasn't just a concert. It was the biggest humanitarian event in music history. Bob Geldof had assembled the world's biggest stars for one purpose: to raise money for famine relief in Africa. Among them was Tina Turner, at the peak of her solo career. But what the 89,000 people in attendance didn't know was that behind the glittering stage outfit, behind the confident stride, Tina was carrying a weight that threatened to crush her. The coffee cup rattled against the saucer. Tina set it down carefully, pressing her palms flat against the hotel room table. Philadelphia sprawled below her window, gray and ordinary on this July morning. In 6 hours, she would be on the biggest stage of her life, but right now, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Miss Turner." Sarah's voice carried through the bathroom door. "Cars coming in 20. Tina stared at her reflection in the dark window. The woman looking back wore a cream silk robe. No makeup. Without the armor of stage clothes and spotlights, she looked smaller, more like Anna Mae than Tina. "Ready when you are," she called back. Though nothing about this felt ready. In the mirror, she practiced her interview smile. The one that said everything was perfect, "Thank you for asking." Corners of her mouth lifted on cue, but her eyes stayed guarded. They always stayed guarded. 20 years of guarding. 20 years of armor. Today felt different though. Today the armor felt heavier. "Fine," came out automatically when Sarah asked if she was okay. The same answer she'd given for 2 decades. Fine when Ike's fist connected with her ribs. Fine when the lawyers said she'd get nothing in the divorce. Fine when she was eating beans from a can, wondering if anyone would ever want to hear her sing again. Always fine. Roger Davies waited in the back seat of the black car, flipping through production notes. He glanced up as she slid in, his expression shifting from business to concern. "You sleep at all, some?" He studied her face. Roger had learned to read the signs, the particular stillness that meant she was somewhere else entirely, fighting battles he could only guess at. "This is going to be good," he said quietly. "Historic, even." Historic. The word sat strangely in the air between them. Tina turned toward the window, watching Philadelphia blur past, everyone heading toward the same place she was, but from such different spaces. They believed in something today, in music's power to heal things that seemed beyond healing. What did she believe in? In the distance, JFK Stadium rose like a concrete coliseum. Even from miles away, Tina could feel its pull, 89,000 seats waiting to be filled. Cameras positioned to beam this moment into homes across the world. Roger was talking about logistics, about lighting cues and sound checks. His voice faded into background noise, as Tina watched a group of kids practicing dance moves on a street corner. They moved with the unconscious joy she remembered from her earliest days on stage, before performing became about survival instead of celebration. When had she stopped dancing for joy? The car turned into the stadium complex. Suddenly they were surrounded by chaos, trucks, cables, crews shouting instructions over radio static. The controlled mayhem of creating magic through careful logistics. Miss Turner's dressing room is B7, someone said into a walkie-talkie. B7, she would remember that later. When people asked her where it all began to unravel, the dressing room was small and beige, designed for function rather than comfort. A mirror surrounded by bulbs that were too bright. A rack for costumes that hadn't arrived yet. Linda, her makeup artist, was already unpacking brushes and palettes, with the efficient movements of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "How are you feeling?" Linda asked, not looking up from her kit. "Good," Tina said, settling into the chair. "Excited." The words felt foreign in her mouth. When was the last time she'd felt excited about performing, rather than just prepared for it? A knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Miss Turner, Elton John's here to see you." Elton burst through the door before she could answer, resplendent in a sequined jacket that caught the dressing room lights and threw them back in rainbow fragments. His smile was genuine, warm, exactly what she needed, and exactly what she felt incapable of receiving. "Darling." He swept her into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and nervous energy. "You look absolutely radiant, ready to knock them dead." "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. The automatic response that meant nothing and everything. "I was just talking to Bob," Elton continued. "He's beside himself with excitement. Says this might be the most important concert any of us ever do." Important. Another word that sat strangely. Important to whom? For what? "You nervous at all?" she asked, genuinely curious. Elton considered the question. "Terrified," he admitted. "But the good kind of terrified, the kind that means something matters." Something matters. She envied his certainty. Her terror felt less organized, more like a general alarm system that never quite turned off. "5 minutes, Miss Turner." The call came from the corridor. 5 minutes until she became the performer rather than the person. Linda began working with gentle strokes. Foundation to even out the complexion. Concealer for the shadows under her eyes that came from sleeping badly for weeks. Through the thin walls, they could hear the stadium filling up. The low rumble of 89,000 conversations blending into a sound like distant thunder. Occasionally a cheer would rise and fall as someone recognized an arriving performer. The noise pulled at something deep in Tina's chest. All those people, all those expectations, all those strangers who had paid money to see her pretend to be someone she wasn't entirely sure she was anymore. She closed her eyes and tried to remember the last time she'd felt genuine joy on stage. It had been years ago, when every night felt like proof that she could survive anything. Now survival felt like its own kind of prison. When had performing become about endurance instead of ecstasy? "They love you out there," Linda continued. "Can you hear them chanting your name?" Love. Such a complicated word. They loved her, yes, but they loved the version of her that existed under spotlights. The one who never stumbled, never doubted, never showed anything but fierce confidence. What would they think of the woman sitting in this chair right now, fighting the urge to call Roger and say she was sick? "Almost done," Linda said, stepping back. "You look beautiful." In the mirror, Tina Turner looked back at her. Hair teased to perfection, makeup flawless, ready for anything, but behind those carefully made-up eyes was something Linda couldn't have painted away with any amount of skill. She stood smoothing down the sequined dress, stage armor, beautiful and effective, walking toward the stage. Her heels clicked against concrete floors, everyone moving with purpose, everyone knowing exactly where they belonged. The stage manager appeared at her elbow. "Ready, Miss Turner?" She nodded, though the word had stopped meaning anything useful. From the wings she could see the crowd for the first time. 89,000 people spread out like a human ocean. Their faces turned toward the stage with expressions of anticipation and hope. But standing there, watching all those faces, She felt something crack inside her chest. Some careful construction she'd built to keep performing while keeping safe. What if she wasn't strong enough? Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed across the stadium, performing What's Love Got to Do with It. Please welcome the incomparable Tina Turner. The roar hit her like a physical force. 89,000 people on their feet, screaming her name, believing in her before she'd sung a single note. She stepped into the lights. The stage was enormous, larger than anything she'd performed on before. The lights were hotter, brighter, but muscle memory took over. Her body knew how to move. Her voice knew how to project. The opening guitar riff cut through the stadium air. The bass line began its familiar pulse. The crowd recognized the song immediately, their cheers doubling in intensity. The band started the familiar opening bars, and for the first verse, everything was exactly as it had been in rehearsal. Professional, polished, perfect. First I get nervous, then I get hurt, she sang, and the words felt appropriate in a way they never had before. Her voice carried easily across the vast space. The crowd was with her, singing along, swaying to the beat. She could see their faces in the first few rows, illuminated by the stage lights. This was what she lived for, supposedly, this connection between performer and audience. But something was wrong. The wrongness started small, a flutter in her chest during the second verse, a momentary disconnection between what she was singing and what she was feeling. What's love got to do with it? What did love have to do with anything? She'd built her life around survival, around proving that she didn't need anyone. Love had been the thing that nearly destroyed her. In the front rows she could see individual faces now. A teenage girl singing along with tears streaming down her cheeks. A middle-aged man with his arms around his wife. An elderly woman in a wheelchair, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. All those people, believing in something she wasn't sure she possessed. What's love but a second-hand emotion? The line that had always felt like truth, now felt like a lie, or maybe a half-truth, which was worse. The bridge approached, the part where her voice was supposed to soar with confidence and power. Instead, what came out was smaller, more uncertain. A few people in the front rows noticed. She could see concern flickering across their faces. What's love got to do with it? This time the question sounded like what it was, a plea for understanding from someone who'd spent so long protecting herself that she'd forgotten what she was protecting. The band played on, professional to the end, but Tina felt herself pulling back from the microphone, from the crowd, from the moment itself. The armor she'd worn for 20 years was suddenly too heavy to carry. She stopped singing, not dramatically, not with any announcement or explanation. She simply let her voice fade away, until there was only the band playing, and 89,000 people realizing that something unexpected was happening. The silence that followed wasn't immediate. It took a few seconds for the crowd to understand that the music had stopped, that something unscripted was occurring. Conversations died out in waves, starting with the people closest to the stage. When the quiet finally settled, it was complete. Tina stood at the center of it, still holding the microphone, still surrounded by lights and cameras. But for the first time in decades, she wasn't performing. She was just being, standing there, breathing, feeling the weight of all those eyes and all that expectation, but also feeling something else, something that felt like the beginning of truth. She looked out at the crowd, 89,000 faces turned toward her, with expressions ranging from confusion to concern to curious anticipation. In the wings, Bob Geldof stood frozen. Television directors frantically discussed whether to cut to commercial. Band members exchanged uncertain glances, but Tina wasn't paying attention to any of that. For the first time in longer than she could remember, She was paying attention to herself, to the girl from Nutbush who'd sung because it felt like flying, to the young woman who'd thought love meant accepting whatever was given, to the survivor who'd built walls so high she couldn't see over them anymore. Standing in front of 89,000 people, she felt more alone than she ever had, and somehow, that aloneness felt like the first honest thing she'd experienced in years. She lifted the microphone back to her lips. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice carrying across the stadium. "I'm sorry, not for stopping the song, not for the confusion she'd caused, but for all the time she'd performed strength she didn't feel, confidence she didn't possess, certainty about things that remained mysteries to her." The apology hung in the air for a long moment. Then someone in the crowd started clapping. Not the rhythmic, encouraging clapping of an audience trying to get a show back on track, but the slow, steady applause of recognition. Another person joined in, then another. Within moments, the entire stadium was applauding, not for a performance, but for a moment of honesty that had cost something to give. Tina walked off stage to the longest standing ovation of her career, and for the first time in 20 years, she didn't wonder if it was enough. Behind her, the stage manager was already cubing the next act. The machinery of Live Aid rolled forward, as it was designed to do, but something had shifted in those few minutes of silence. The corridor back to her dressing room felt different now. Other performers and crew members she passed looked at her with something new in their eyes. Not pity, but recognition. David Bowie caught her eye. As she passed his dressing room, he simply nodded, a gesture that conveyed more understanding than 1,000 words. In the dressing room, she sat in front of the mirror again. Her makeup was ruined, her hair disheveled, but the woman looking back at her didn't look smaller anymore. She looked real. Linda appeared in the doorway first. "Miss Turner." "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Roger appeared moments later, his phone buzzing constantly. "That was," he began, then stopped. "I know," she said. "The phones are already ringing. Interview requests. Talk shows, everyone wants to know what happened out there." Tina smiled, and for once the expression reached her eyes. The weight she'd carried for so long felt different now, not gone but transformed into something she could finally manage. "Tell them," she said, "that I finally remembered who I was before I became who I thought I needed to be." Outside the dressing room, the concert continued. Elton took the stage to thunderous applause. David Bowie followed with his own set. The afternoon rolled forward, with the momentum of something larger than any individual performance. But even as other acts delivered powerful sets, people kept talking about Tina's performance. In the concession areas, strangers struck up conversations about the moment when the music stopped. The security guard who had escorted her from the stage told his colleague, "In 30 years of working concerts, I've never seen anything like that." But for Tina Turner, the real performance, the one that mattered, had just begun, and this time she wouldn't need armor to carry it through. If this incredible story of vulnerability and strength moved you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more untold stories about the moments when music's biggest stars showed us their most human sides. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that it's okay to not be okay, even when the whole world is watching. And hit that notification bell, so you never miss these powerful stories about the real people behind the legends.